Welcome to the Back to Me podcast, where we help multicultural incoming freshman women and men manage their entire college experience throughout post-graduation to successfully transition into entrepreneurship and corporate workspaces as new hires.
Back to me. Oh, I turned it around. I'm back to me. I finally figured it out. I'm back to me. So when you think you have nothing, back to me. I go back to me. Yeah, I'm back to me.
Hello, everyone. It's your host, Yoli Tamu. Being resilient does not always mean we are okay. In this week's episode, Dr. DeAndre Poole, clinical psychology professor at Morgan State University, joins us to discuss the importance of addressing suicidal thoughts head on. As a faculty staff member at the largest HBCU in the country, Dr. Poole organized the first suicide prevention walk on his campus in partnership with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. Find out how to let go of the stigmatization of mental illness so that you can live a life filled with hope and optimism. Enjoy. Dr. DeAndre Poole, how's it going?
Going great. Thank you very much. And thank you for the plug for the National Treasure for Morgan State University. My alma mater.
That's right, HBCU. Gotta represent. You said that's your alma mater?
Yes, it is. So I'm back. It's just like different world. You know, I went to the HBCU and had my experience, and now I'm back to work there. You know what I mean?
How cool. You are definitely paying it forward. How about that? I love it. I love it. Okay. So, I told you that when I found you, I saw that you were a part of a suicide prevention walk. And before we get into that, I wanted to get an idea as to why psychology became your choice and your field of study. Why did you decide to pursue this route?
Okay, wow.
A big question, huh?
Interesting question. I was just telling my students about this today that psychology is not a field that somebody gets into for fame or for money. I'm almost willing to say that probably over 90% of psychologists go into psychology because of some personal account, normally some type of trauma or some type of negative experience that's caused them to either A, want to learn how to help others, or B, they want to understand whatever the struggle was that they had it. So it's always more of a personal account or a personal experience, never really, for other reasons. Like I said, like money or just this is a nice profession to go into. Is always some type of a personal experience. And so mine was that I definitely spent some time in foster care when I was growing up. And when you're in foster care, for anybody out there that knows about it, most likely you've seen some type of a psychologist or some type of mental health professional. The ones that I met with were very inspirational, the first couple of ones. And so that's kind of how I got on the journey of wanting to study psychology. But having said that, I would like to say for all of the people that are out there listening that are up and coming psychologists or maybe in their psychology doctorate or master's program, or maybe that are actually psychologists, because it's likely that a lot of us have dealt with struggles or trauma in the past, I really recommend for each psychologist to do their own therapy as well, to really do their own work. Now, most psychology doctorate programs require, the students to be in therapy as well, but you don't have to wait for that. You can start ahead of time because see, if you don't do that, then what you can get and what I'm afraid of is kind of, people that are broken from trauma helping other people. And a lot of people think that can't be done. Not that it necessarily can't be done, but it's easier if you've worked through your own stuff. So definitely all psychologists need to be in therapy or have had some, experience with it prior to, performing their jobs.
That's pretty powerful to say because, you hear all the time that sometimes psychologists have their own issues. That's why they're in psychology. Have you heard that before? And I think what you're saying is so valuable that it is important that you've had some sort of experience, some sort of encounter, and you've made it to the other side. I don't think that you should be going through something and pursue psychology. You might want to get on the other side. You know what I mean? How do you feel about
Definitely.
that?
Well, it's kind of because psychologists get a really bad rap right? Sometimes, because I feel like, first of all, there's always that thing out there of there's the crazy psychologist. You see it, depicted in television shows and whatnot all the time. And I think what they're speaking to is what I just talked about, is that a lot of them have been through their trauma. But back to what I was saying is that sometimes I think that psychologists are held to an unfair ethical, level. Then sometimes people don't even hold their MDs, to that type of level. And you have to understand two things. Number one, that we're human. We're definitely human, and we really care about everybody, the people, and definitely the people that we work with in our jobs. But please don't forget that this is a job. This is a job. We are trained professionals that have gone to school for countless and countless and countless years. So just because something's going on in their personal life doesn't necessarily mean that they can't do their job at the same time. So I don't know. I want to be nice to psychologists, because we're people just like everybody else. We listen to a lot of stuff all day long. And so by the time we get off, we're just ready to, word salad to anybody that'll listen, So
I got you.
yes, we definitely want the psychologist to be well adjusted, definitely. But don't forget that we're human, just like everybody else, And if you're going to hold us to that ethical standard, hold everybody to it as well, because, ethics are important.
That's a powerful point. I love it. So as I was saying, I found you on the Morgan State site when the suicide prevention walk happened back in May. And you led that, you directed that. Can you tell us about what the suicide prevention walk is and why it was done on your campus?
The suicide prevention walk, okay, well, there are two types. First of all, they are spearheaded, led, organized by the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention, right? So they do a walk in every major city in the United States. So, I'm in Baltimore, they'll have one here in Baltimore. You're in LA, they'll have one there in LA. I've been to one before in Washington, D.C. They have walks like that. Now, the one that I had is a campus walk, meaning that it's done on a college campus. And so basically, the walk is to bring awareness, through visibility about suicide, because we believe, we as in Morgan State University Counseling Center and the FSP, believe that awareness is prevention, and especially in the Black community with people that look like you and I, this topic is very taboo, stigmatized, not talked about. There's a lot of anxiety around this topic. But the results show that, just like everything, there's definitely a disparaging number of us that do complete suicide. Notice I didn't say commit, I said complete, or die by suicide. Now, to finish answering your question, came into being interested in working with the AFSP and having a suicide walk, because again, this goes back, psychology, it goes back to a personal account. While I was in my doctorate program, my uncle actually died by suicide. And it was really obviously a very tough experience for me. But I remember that once I got my, thoughts halfway together to make a statement, one of the first things that I said was that I said these exact words. I said that Black people don't kill themselves. That's exactly what I said. I had just found out this information not even 5 minutes earlier. So now, going through that experience, meeting other survivors, because when you go to these suicide walks, you meet other survivors, and it's definitely a community, especially if you're talking about a Black suicide survivor, it's a small community, and not a lot of people understand what that feels like to lose someone to that. You kind of have to be close to it or be in that club. So from that, I met a lot of people. And like I told you earlier, that, this happens in our community at a disproportionate rate. So from that, I don't want anybody else to have that thought again. I don't want anybody else to think that we don't do that, because we do. So the visibility was very important. That's how the walk came about. I called up the AFSP. And at first, I wasn't initially saying that I wanted to do a walk. I was saying that I just wanted to do something with them, period. You know what I mean? And they kind of recommended the suicide walk, and I knew about it because I had been to one before. And then they started showing me a bunch of schools in Maryland, because each state has their own chapter or charter, whatever you want to call it. So I'm in Maryland. And so when they started to show me all the schools, because Maryland, I think it's the Maryland and Delaware together, they started showing me all the schools that had the campus walk. I promise you, I saw somewhere between 6 to 10 schools, probably closer to 10. None of them were HBCUs. So, of course, that got the wheels turning. And after my head spun around a couple of times, I was just like, we should bring this to a HBCU. So that's how it all came about. That's how the idea came about, that visibility, bringing it to HBCUs. There's a very disproportionate rate of suicide amongst African Americans between the ages of 14 and 21, depending on what the studies say. And those ages are the age, some of those ages are the ages that we serve, in college campuses. So that's where that other, motivation came from. And I just want to say, I know I'm speaking a lot about, our community, and I don't have to apologize for that, but suicide doesn't see any color. It doesn't see color. It doesn't see, ethnicity. It doesn't see sexual orientation. It doesn't see gender. It doesn't see anything. So we all, should have education, in this area, definitely.
I think it's pretty profound. Like you said, you didn't see any HBCUs. And I believe Morgan State is the largest HBCU. Is that correct?
It is. Yes.
Wow.
Yes, it is. It is.
So that's pretty powerful to have that partnership.
Yes. It felt good. It felt good to do that. It felt good to be the first to partner with the AFSP. And there was also a walk at Bowie State University, which is also an HBCU here, trying to get more. So it should be all of them. It should be just as many of any other, college as well.
And I was just thinking about what you said about, Black people don't kill themselves. You said that was something that you read about. Was that through conversation, or where did you find that out? Or is that just that taboo that we've been walking around with?
I didn't read about that. That was just the taboo. That's what's in the community. That's what I get. I don't know where I got that from. I must have just picked it up from us,
Yeah.
And I had never met anyone, from our community, or I had never met anyone that wanted to admit that they lost to a loved one of suicide. Because now that happened, that was almost 10 years ago that happened with my uncle. So obviously I've been observing, more with others. And I've seen some situations where it might have been this, but this was described, So I had never met anyone that was Black that did it before. So just the stigmatization from overall, but also specifically from our community. That's where that came from. A very ignorant statement.
And I wonder if that comes from the resilience that we have naturally as a community. We've gone through so many things, but I think as we grow in these generations, there seems to be disconnects and communication that doesn't happen as often. So maybe that's why the rate is up. I can't call it. I don't know why the rate is up, but that might be it. There's a disconnect in our generations.
Yes, right. But back to that word you said about resilient, is that yes, we are resilient, and we're resilient because we had to be. But that doesn't mean that we're always okay, right? I feel like as Black people, because we have a history of overcoming the worst adversities, that if we're going through something, people just expect us to be able to overcome it.
Right.
That's not always the case. We're not always resilient. We struggle with things sometimes. Sometimes we get down, sometimes we lose motivation. We're not these things that can just overcome everything. We're good at it, but, and we're all different. We're not a monolithic group of people. So sometimes we do have to go on a case-by-case basis. So yes, we are very strong people, definitely. But because of that, we have the tendency, like I was saying a second ago, to sort of stigmatize not just suicide, but mental illness overall.
In general.
And especially our men.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I just think that we should just put it out there that it's okay not to be okay.
Powerful stuff. And I mean, man, we can go a whole nother direction because spirituality plays a part in all of this as well. But I want to focus in on your students because you're also an adjunct professor, correct?
Yes, I am.
So now when you're talking to your students and you're in your experience with them, what are some strategies that you would offer, or do you offer to them to reduce the likelihood of them thinking about suicide? I don't know if you have these types of conversations. Are there strategies and tips that you offer them?
Yes. I love how you said thinking about suicide, because that's where it all starts from, the ideation. Okay. One thing that I say to them for that, but I've just been saying overall, not just to my students, but everybody, but to my students, is that it's very simple. Tell someone. Tell someone. Okay. If that person doesn't listen, tell someone else. If that person doesn't listen, tell someone else until somebody listens. Sometimes when people do disclose suicidal ideations, they might not get the support if they say it the first time. A lot of times it's because the person that they're telling is not equipped to handle that information. You understand what I'm saying? And maybe they don't understand the severity of this or the privilege, right, that they have by that person telling them that. Because, like I told you that personal story about my uncle earlier, he didn't tell anyone. He kept that all to himself. It was all planned. We never had an opportunity to help him. You know what I mean? So tell someone, first of all. It will help you. It will help your family. If they don't listen, continue to tell someone else. The other one, the second one, is what we've kind of gone over. One of the reasons why they're afraid to tell someone is because we in our community stigmatize mental illness. You know what I mean? So I try to tell my students to destigmatize. I do tell my students, and we talk about this a lot at the counseling center, to destigmatize mental illness as much as you possibly can. And then it'll make people comfortable with disclosing suicidal ideations. And then the third one is just, a lot of times suicide is a result of some type of depression, some type of severe depression. And one of the things that you see in severe depression and suicidality is a lack of motivation, just not wanting to do anything, just always laying around and be quiet is another one. Because, this can build up. It's not like not all the time. People don't just say one week, get depressed, and the next week say, I'm on a complete suicide. Sometimes this goes their whole life. You know what I mean? So sometimes we might subscribe something like somebody being quiet, shy, reserved to just their personality because we've seen them do it for so long, but they've developed that as a personality because they've been doing it so long. You know what I mean? But it doesn't mean that they are okay. So back to the motivation piece. Get active, do something, get up. For me personally, one thing that I like to do to stay motivated is I like to play tennis. I was blessed with that interest since I was a child. So if I get too down in the dumps, I'm blessed because it's built in me. I can just get up and go play tennis. Everybody has to find what it is they can do that is in psychology is called behavioral activation, right? What you can do to get up and just move around, get the blood flowing, and that will in itself increase your mood. Yes.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So now when you say tell someone, 988, is that the number now that people can call?
Yes. The national number for mental health.
Okay. So that covers a lot of things.
Mm-hmm. Yes, 988 is definitely a number that people can utilize. There's also another number that I'll provide to you for the AFSP as well. You can afsp.org. A lot of young people, they don't like to dial numbers. They like to go online. So you can talk to somebody online there, or you can also get the number from them as well.
That's interesting. You said that they don't like to call. So they prefer to text or chat with someone.
I think so. Definitely.
Interesting. Okay. That's good to know.
So there are outlets out there for their modality of communication as well. Yes.
This is good. So destigmatizing. So are there some examples of destigmatizing? So like you just kind of just casually bring up, like you just said, you've had a close encounter with it because of your uncle. You've had to go to counseling yourself. Is that a way to destigmatize it for a young person?
Yes. Giving them the room to speak. Listening is a big one because when somebody comes to you and they're disclosing something so personal as a suicidal ideation, a lot of people who are not in the mental health profession, they make a very elementary mistake. And that is that they go directly to solve the problem. That is the worst thing that you could do. Because if that person is coming to you, trust me, they've run it over in their heads over and over and over. They probably know what to do. They just want somebody to listen. That's it. Don't try to go into it. Just sit there and listen, open-ended. That's a big one. But another way to destigmatize mental illness, a big one, is watch how you talk about it, right? Watch some of the ways that you speak about people who are experiencing mental illness. Notice I said experiencing mental illness and not who are mentally ill, because that's not who they are. That's just what they experience. So instead of a depressed person, a person living with depression, or a schizophrenic, a person who experiences schizophrenia. Always remember that the person is not the diagnosis. They just experience it, and try to use person first, language when you're describing it. That's a big way.
Oh, that's powerful. The person is not the diagnosis. My goodness. And they are experiencing it. That's powerful.
Living with it is another way to say it. Challenges, stuff like that.
I like that. I like it.
We have a lot of things that we say about people, negative terms that we could come up with that we say about people who have mental health challenges, like calling them crazy, or, we can go on and on and on with that. Those aren't good. Those are adding to the stigma. And then, if we're going back to the Black community and the struggle we were talking about earlier, we've dealt with so much trauma that it's likely that we do experience a mental illness.
I think so. Yes.
And so, so we want to be more careful than anybody, because it could be any of us. Some people believe that all of us are born with PTSD due to being descendants of slaves, so we could go on and on with that.
On and on. I love this conversation. Well, I really appreciate you being with us. I always wrap up with final words of encouragement. And I mean, for you to say, that you already know that students prefer to reach out online. I'd love for you to provide that website or even where they can contact you if they want to. But first, before we wrap, just, encouraging words for that young person that's just seeking to navigate, through this world. They're in transition into a new college environment, because that's who we serve here, as well as that postgraduate. They're heading out into the workforce. They're both in that transitional stage. Words of encouragement. What do you got?
Okay. First one, a little bit of advice. Please network. Please network. Even if you're not a people person and you don't like to talk to people, try to make as many professional contacts as you can. I don't care if you're trying to be a professional psychologist or a professional football player. You're not going to get there just from hard work, especially if you're Black. You're not going to get there just from hard work. You have to know somebody to let you in the door. There are people out here right now with law degrees, with doctorate degrees, who are driving Uber and DoorDash because they don't have an opportunity. Learn that skill early. Network, please. And then another piece of advice is, regardless of what you do, and I don't mean any harm, and I'm very unapologetic about what I'm about to say. I don't care if it's family or whoever it is. Don't ever let anyone marginalize you. Don't ever let anyone make you think that you're lower than what you are. We are all put here. I'm spiritual. We're all put here by God. We all have our challenges, and we all have our goals and aspirations and destiny. Nobody is better than anybody. We are all equal. We are all God's children. And don't ever let anybody tell you different. Because along the way, especially like back to us, these people that look like us, when you're trying to move up the scale, there's going to be a lot of people that try to put you in the box, that try to break you down. Unfortunately, some of the people may even look like me and you. You know what I mean?
I was just going to say, yes.
Don't let them do it. Don't believe it. Don't let them do it in real time, and don't let them do it in your mind. Don't ever let anyone marginalize you, please.
Because the person that's trying to marginalize you is marginalized themselves already.
Right. Thank you for saying that. They do that to themselves. They do that to themselves every day. So when they're doing it to you, they're just projecting. They're just generalizing it. They might really, honestly, they might not even mean any harm. That's just how they operate. You know what I mean?
Oh, powerful to say.
Point that out to them. Point that out to them and let them keep that over there. But don't let them get in your mind, because this mind is a very, very precious thing. A lot of people don't have sound mind. Sometimes we have to be really thankful to God just for having a sound mind. Don't ever let anybody cloud that.
So good. So good. Thank goodness. I'm so glad I met you. It was meant to be.
Can I circle back to one thing I said? Because I put this out here, and I don't want to leave people with the information when I said that a lot of us deal with mental illness. Now, real quick, just because we're dealing with a mental illness or a mental health challenge does not mean that it's diagnosable. Doesn't mean that we have a diagnosis. A diagnosis of anything, take depression, for example, has a criteria that has to be met. Let's just say the number for the criteria is 5. Some of us may be dealing with 2 or 3 criteria. We don't have a full diagnosis, but we still may be dealing with a mental health challenge, which could also be confronted, in therapy. You know what I mean? So just because we're destigmatizing mental illness, or maybe, just because someone goes to therapy, doesn't necessarily mean they're certifiable or that they have a diagnosis. But therapy and destigmatizing mental illness is good for everybody, regardless of it, everybody.
Mm-hmm. Anybody dealing with anxiety on any level can get some help.
Absolutely.
Love it. I love it.
Absolutely.
Well, I appreciate you being with us, and I'm so grateful that we met and that you said yes. I love when powerful people like yourself say yes. So for our listeners that want to reach out to you or even the organization that you mentioned, where can they reach out?
Okay, so they can reach out to AFSP.org. You can follow. Okay, well, mine is Reloaded 5. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm not in the gang. That's just my line name. Reloaded 5, and that's my number.
Okay.
Morgan State Counseling Center. That's also a IG handle. I gave y'all AFSP. Yeah.
Okay.
That should do it.
I love it. You said that's your line name. What's your frat?
My frat. Thank you. My frat is Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Gamma Chapter.
All right.
Yes.
I love it. Well, this has been a pleasure. I love talking to you, and I can't wait to talk to you more. And thank you so much for being with us for Suicide Prevention Month. It means a lot.
Thank you, too. This was a really good opportunity, a new experience for me. I've never done a podcast. So everybody...
You did great. You did great.
Okay.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you so much. I really appreciate this.
Absolutely. All right. You take care of yourself. We'll talk soon.
You too.
Bye. Thank you for joining us. It's okay to not be okay. So reach out to someone you trust or text 988 to get free and confidential emotional support. For more information about other episodes, remember to subscribe to the Back to Me podcast, College and Beyond. I'm your host, Yoli Tamu. Leave a review at the end of this podcast, and if you would like to learn more about other special events, join the Back to Me podcast Facebook group or simply text Back to Me to 833-206-4565. Until next time, be well.